My brain hurts. I know that I'm playing a detective, but that doesn't mean I personally am one. Oh God, I don't know what jelly beans are supposed to go in to what stuffed animals. I can't. Number 3 on our lists is another list. And
Perfect.
this is going to be fun. 6 classic role-playing tropes that aren't actually fun. Thank you to mythcreants.com for this lovely article. I think that this is lovely. We're going to go over some tropes that you probably don't like. Tell me if you've encountered these.
Lists.
Yeah,
That's a trope I don't like.
I don't like lists. Well, then you're gonna hate this segment because we're
I hate
doing
this
one more.
whole thing.
We hate
Oh,
this
no, it's
episode.
fine.
Number 44 in TPK, the last one. Okay, so, all right,
No, that needs to be episode 404.
404. That's right. Okay, this list actually counts up in numbers, unlike the last ones. So
Great.
just
We're
keep that.
counting up. We'll
Yeah.
do it backwards then.
Sure. Anyway, so the first one, fighting
Number
a rust monster. Okay? Without a doubt, I'll explain it.
Okay.
Without a doubt, the rust monster is in the running for most well-known D&D beastie. It's a fan favorite, turning metal into bits of oxidized scrap with the greatest of ease. Players remember their first encounter with a rust monster, and for good reason. It might be the only time the full plate wearing fighter tries to hide behind the squishy wizard. While DMs cackle at the thought of unleashing this corrosive beast upon players, we often forget what the game is like for the fighter in question. They're suddenly trapped in an adventure without their armor, weapons, or both. D&D is a game that assumes the PC always has access to their basic gear. Without that, warrior classes lose their primary means of interacting with the setting. There's more here, but I'll just read the last paragraph that's kind of important. If we want destroying a PC's gear to be fun, it has to be built into the game, not tacked on, as in most systems. If it takes 3 attacks to bring down the rust monster, it should take the rust monster at least 3 hits to destroy a vital piece of gear. Alternately, there could be more for the fighter to do with than hit things with their sword. In systems like Burning Wheel, a fighter with no weapon still has a bunch of useful skills to fall back on. So, rust monsters, Alex, have you ever encountered those?
I don't remember if I've ever encountered one. I enjoy rust monsters. I think they're great. I think they're neat. But I also think that throwing a party that is ill-equipped and ill-formed to deal with a rust monster is not a good idea. It's similar to you guys going up against a group of lycanthropes, not knowing how to deal with lycanthropes and having no way to deal with lycanthropes.
And having no gear that really works for it, yeah.
Exactly. So, like, if you want to throw in rust monsters into your campaign, as a DM, maybe you go, there's been, like, an issue with a really hungry, ravenous, like, family of rust monsters in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nothing metal is safe. These things, like, they're not evil. They are neutral monsters. They're not evil. They don't have an agenda. They just really love eating metal.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe the mine has been overrun with rust monsters. Can you clear them out?
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, now we have to plan. How do we deal with rust monsters? All right, well, we're changing out our leather, our full plate, which again, most characters don't have full plate for a very long time. But you're changing out your plate armor for, leather or padded, and you're changing out your metal sword for like a sturdy wooden one or a stick or maybe a hammer that's made with stone. So
Yeah.
like, if it's something like that, it can be interesting.
Yeah.
But throwing a rust monster in there just to say, haha, fuck your armor, fuck your weapons,
Yeah.
kind of a dick move.
Right. I am realizing this is like the one monster where Geralt is completely screwed because neither one of his swords, the silver or the
it'll
steel,
eat precious metal too.
it will eat both of them. Right. Here's how you get around a rust monster. Play a monk.
Party of druids.
You could do druid. I was gonna say play a monk if you're a martial class.
That too.
Just punch it. Just punch the
Sure.
rust monster.
I
a
mean,
million
they
times.
can. I mean, players often want to try to have rust monster companions.
Oh yeah, well they're good to have on your side.
Definitely.
Oh
That's
yeah,
how they eat the golden chalice at the king's palace.
that's right. Or metal golems, or
Yeesh.
constructs.
Yeah.
I'd be really worried if I was playing like a Warforged or the new Auto Gnomes, and you come across a rust monster that could just eat you. No. All right. Number 2, running out of supplies. Most role-playing systems still expect players to keep track of their food and ammunition, to say nothing
we don't.
about light sources. Theoretically, they do this because it would be fun to run out of arrows in the middle of a demon-infested swamp. While
Yeah.
that might be good for a good story to tell your grandkids, it's no fun when it actually happens.
So this goes
yeah.
back to like survival mechanics when we talked about that. Another example of why MMOs have really gotten rid of ammo requirements in their games.
Hmm.
Weapons is because, well, they don't want you to be useless.
Mm-hmm.
So like, while I think it is good for especially arrows, like, do I want you guys to make as your DM in D&D? Do I want you guys to make sure you have your equipment? Yes.
Yes.
Do I want you to keep track of every single arrow? Not really.
No, not really. It's the reason why anybody who, if you're like an artificer, you're probably going to try to get like the infusions to just get the magical arrows.
I mean,
stuff like that.
If it were to come down to like, yeah, you can only carry 10 arrows on you, it'd be like, all right, cool. I'm just going to do melee.
Yeah. They have a thing in here to kind of explain about what you could do. While running out of supplies can be a fun plot, it has to be handled with care. Instead of waiting for a character to run through all 500 arrows, running out should be based on something that happens in the game. For example, losing vital spell components is a good consequence for the GM to impose when a character is mauled by an angry demon and left for dead. That's much more exciting than suddenly realizing you're out of lamp oil.
Yeah.
So, something to consider. Honestly, I remember I was hearing somebody recently talk about, like, hey, like, could we do something about, like, material components for spells, where, like, maybe you don't necessarily need some of those components if you've mastered, like, first level or second level spells, and I'm sitting there kind of going, I don't think I've ever had to worry about material components, unless it's, like, a really expensive gem or something, where I'd be like, oh, I should probably have that on my person. But when they're talking about, like, here's a bit of carrot, and you need a stick, and you need some twigs from an oak tree, it's like, when am I gonna come across that to cast a damn spell? Like,
You need the scale of fish, but you're in the desert. Good luck.
yeah, you need fish scales. All right, I guess I can't cast this. I think it just makes it harder for you to cast spells and give you limited options. So, okay, number 3. Hardcore character death.
Perfect.
Players love to talk about all the times their character narrowly escaped death. Death is supposed to lurk around every corner, just one failed reflex save away. It's rooted in the idea that GMs are the antagonists trying to wipe out their party, and it's patently ridiculous. I've yet to encounter a system where the GM couldn't easily wipe out every PC at the table.
Isn't this something you keep accusing me of?
It's that boar, man.
Yeah, that boar. Not my fault.
Occasional PC death can still be great for a role-playing story, but requires a lot of planning. It shouldn't happen because of a failed spot check. Deaths should have a dramatic purpose, and the relevant player should be consulted ahead. Mouse Guard has this dynamic baked into its rules. Players should know if a given role risks their character's death, and it's up to them whether to go through with it. Yeah, I mean, I think that the system where you have, like, death saving throws is okay. And then there's resurrection or being able to spare the dying or something like that, where you can, at least stabilize someone. But permadeath for characters is,
I don't know that many systems in tabletop have a permadeath for RPGs. Like, generally, there's some sort of way you could get resurrected, I mean, not everyone's gonna have the means for that. But
true.
then you can also go with the idea that, aside from Deus Ex Machinas, which are not fun for anyone, but like maybe you leave it as a story thread, like, oh yeah, your party can resurrect you. This guy's offering his services, but now you owe him.
Right.
You know, as far as like making, I did it say make the death? It didn't say make the death meaningful, did it?
No.
Because that's something I don't ascribe to. Yes, your death, like, if you have a meaningful death, that's great, but I do not ascribe to make sure all your players have a planned out, meaningful, impactful death. Like, if you guys are like, I'm gonna jump off this cliff,
Mm,
and I'm like, okay, you realize that would kill you.
right. Right.
It's like, I'm not gonna be like, ah, yes, you failed your role to, like, you know, grab a branch. It's like, all right, well, this is difficult, and it's like, you have a very real chance of dying. It's like, I'm not gonna be like, ah, well, you failed that one roll and you died, and if you bitched about it, I'd be like, listen, you told me you were jumping off a fucking cliff.
Yeah, what
That
did
was
you think
400
was going
feet
to
high.
happen?
It's
Yeah.
like, okay. But like, you know, it's one of those weird topics where, do I think you should outwardly just, again, the spot check idea? Yeah, you probably shouldn't just kill players with like a trap.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a particularly deadly area and there are traps here that are particularly deadly, they should either be able to at least handle that a bit or have a recourse around it. Don't give it like, ah, yes, Indiana Jones fucking stone in the hallway trap that'll crush you.
Right.
If it's like one failed check will kill you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they did make a mention of it having dramatic purpose, but I don't think deaths really have to. I mean, sometimes it's just that the players are being dumb or purposefully stupid. And
Fighting a boar that I told them they couldn't handle.
yeah, exactly. You know, it happens. Rembrandt dove into Technicolor Hell Dimension. Now, he did that for glorious purpose, essentially, of trying to keep somebody else from, like, falling in. But that didn't work out so well. And now he's trapped in a Technicolor Hell Dimension, and that's just the way it is. He probably died in there.
He's just living his best life.
What's left of it. Number 4. Being a prisoner.
Elder. all of the Elder Scrolls games.
All the Elder Scrolls games, and pretty much a portion of every single game known to mankind. Listening to longtime role players talk about their various campaigns, you might get the idea that PCs spend most of their time in jail. They're always getting thrown in there by the City Watch or an evil overlord and then busting out in dramatic escape sequence. Hey, you know, even in the new D&D movie, there's a whole thing set in a prison, so there's that. I realized this a long time ago that there is a huge number of RPGs in video games, especially, where at some point you are going to end up captured, all your gear is going to get taken away from you, and then you have to break out and recover your gear.
Yeah, that happens to me as Hephaestus.
Yes.
And the thing about capturing a druid that knows how to shapeshift is you really can't.
Exactly. Yeah. But there is a sequence just off the top of my head in KOTOR. You're captured by Darth Malak, and then all of your characters are thrown into a jail cell without their clothes or gear, and you have to recover it. In Deus Ex, there's a part where you get captured by what ends up being like the Knight Templar, and then you have to escape from the cell, and you have to recover your gear. Fable, Jack of Hearts, or Jack of all trades. He captures you, throws you into a jail cell. You spend like years and years being tortured, and then you have to get out and recover all your gear. It's kind of a thing that happens a lot, and of course, yes, every Elder Scrolls game pretty much starts you there. They say the natural solution is to immediately give them a chance to escape, but that comes with its own problems. Prisons are designed to keep people in. If they aren't formidable, it will damage the credibility of your setting. Why would the villains keep throwing PCs in jail that are too flimsy to hold them? To make the plot happen, I guess, but... Instead, imprisoning PCs should be rare. When it does happen, you can either time jump forward or you can plan something fun while the PC is in jail. The first option is easier, but it means you have to figure out what any PCs on the outside did with their time. Planning a prison-based adventure requires a lot more work, but it can be very rewarding, especially if the PCs are being imprisoned by someone plot relevant. Big bad evil guy put you into a prison. Now figure out how to get out of the prison.
Right.
That's what you're going to do. But I think that it just smacks to the idea that there's just a lot of downtime by nature if you're in prison. So maybe don't do that quite so much. Instead of you all meet in a tavern, you all meet in a prison. How much fun would that be? Hey, it would be more meaningful.
Yeah, it would be more meaningful.
It would explain how you all ended up as a venturing party. I guess there's that. Okay. Number 5. Personally solving a mystery. I have a riddle for you. What's less fun than trying to solve a GM's mystery story without any hints? Trick question, nothing's less fun than that. We'd all love to think our mental facilities are up to the task of figuring out whatever the GM throws at us, but in truth, role-playing games aren't a great medium for figuring out a mystery. You know, I've had a few cases where I was playing games and there was obviously, like, a logic puzzle. I remember James even threw out some logic puzzles for me, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now.
Right.
I just don't. My brain hurts. I know that I'm playing a detective, but that doesn't mean I personally am one. Oh God, I don't know what jelly beans are supposed to go in to what stuffed animals. I can't. The opposite problem can happen too. Sometimes players are a bit too clever and they figure out the mystery 10 minutes into the session. To keep this from happening, GMs should plan for players to use their characters' abilities rather than their own brain power. For anything else, that this would be obvious, but if we don't expect role players to defeat cyborg ninjas in personal combat, why do we expect them to solve mysteries? Let them roll their skills to interpret what clues mean and give hints. Lots of hints. Do you tend to give your players, when you're building a world itself, do you tend to like make a lot of like logic puzzles for them to figure out?
Me personally?
Yeah.
No. I mean, logic puzzles aren't part of the world per se.
Yeah.
I'd rather have interesting things.
Sure.
That have, like, in this one case that we had the ruins strewn throughout the forest.
Sure.
The arches, and it's like, these aren't logic puzzles. There's not a puzzle to be solved here. There's writing that isn't decipherable, but you cannot solve it.
Right.
So instead it was more so that here's a set of conditions that if met, something will happen, but it's not like something you're going to figure out by investigating it. It's something you're just going to, if you try this.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's a difference between, like, let's solve the Indiana Jones, like, boulder puzzle, that kind of thing, and just, like, here's a answer me the riddles 3 sort of thing. Like, now we have to do that. I think that there's the one, like, the Indiana Jones kind of puzzles where it feels like you're on an adventure, and now you just have to figure out how to overcome this one obstacle, and there might be a lot of ways to solve that. But then there are these logic puzzles where there's one specific answer as to how you solve it, and if you don't come up with that, too damn bad, you're going to be stuck here until you actually do that. So, try not to do that. I think one of the things people like about RPGs is being able to, like, work on, you know, otherworldly ways to problem solve and, like, working your problem. It's what you see in a lot of immersive sims and obviously in a lot of tabletop, and people just enjoy being able to try and work it out as a problem that they can solve. And the final one on our list, the final one for the day, completely freeform character creation. Okay, so freedom is often used as a synonym for good when discussing role-playing games, and it's easy to see why. Many role-players spend their formative years in the restrictive clutches of D&D, a game that does not care what you want to do. A fighter will always be a fighter, a wizard will always be a wizard. Trying to make a wizard anything else who can also fight just results in multi-class mess. So, for those who are looking at such restrictive environments, a system that offers no restrictions seems like a great idea. They imagine all the wonderful characters they could create. Enter systems like 7th Sea and Shadowrun. These games give the player a bunch of points and tell them to go nuts. Spend them however you like. Color outside the lines. Anything goes. In practice, it leads to disaster. The problem with absolute freedom in character generation is twofold. One, it's very difficult to balance. While every system is vulnerable to some level of power gaming, it gets worse the more freedom is allowed. In Shadowrun, certain combinations of cybernetic implants will make your character into an unstoppable death machine right out of character creation. Two, absolute freedom means you can make a character that is unplayable. In 7th Sea, it's easy to imagine that your heavily muscled brawler wouldn't need a high level of finesse. However, because of how math works, having a low finesse is a path to ruin for fighting characters because they can't hit anything without it. So basically the point here is that if you have really freeform character design, you will end up having... players will be kind of stupid about it, and they'll make characters that just either are really broken or will break them in the process. The final paragraph here is the key here is that freeform character creation isn't universally a bad thing, just that it can cause problems when applied without thought. Same is true for solving mysteries or fighting creatures that rust your armor. We can use these tropes to generate enjoyment in our game, but only if we examine them carefully. So, what do you think is a reasonable level of, enforced design, I guess I would say, of where...
Enforced design?
Yeah, where, you say, okay, here are, bare minimums of what the game is going to say your character has to have.
Well, I think if you're having a minimum, it means, if you can't make it so that not putting any points in agility means you're never going to hit.
Right.
You have to have a way to either make it so that it's still viable. So the core of the system needs to be doable no matter what.
Right.
And then you're just customizing to play how you want to play.
Right. I think about that just when... I think if, you could take your numbers and you could play around with them however you want, if we took a D&D system, and you were like, oh, great, my strength is now 2. But my dexterity's 30. Yeah, we get into some trouble there,
Sure.
Just because literally there are things not as much trouble if your dexterity was 2 and your strength was 30, because you could hit very hard, but you'd never hit at all, so...
Yeah.
And your initiative would suck.
I mean, you'd still hit your dexterity isn't tied to how you hit indeed.
That's true, especially if it's strength-based, yeah.
But I think, if you were to do something like freeform, and you were to tie your bases to your level, then you still have a core that works regardless of what you pick.
Right. Because otherwise you would end up with a caster, like a sorcerer or a bard, that says, I'm just going to put all of my points into charisma, raise it as high as I possibly can, and then everything else is nothing, but that also makes you just nigh on unplayable as a character. You can't do anything but that one.
It just means you're, hiding behind a steel cage.
You're hiding behind a steel cage, but at the same time, no one will be able to hit your saving throw. You can't throw off a lot of spell. Well, no, I guess charisma would be your saving throw mod. So, yeah, maybe that is good. I think that makes them too OP though.
Maybe. But they're glass cannon.
They're glass cannons. You have literally 2 hit points, but so there you go. Some character tropes. Some tropes from role-playing games that aren't actually fun. And I don't know. I guess the question I would have for anybody listening to this is, are any of those fun for you?
Which one's your favorite? Which one do you hate?
Which one do you
Probably
hate?
Rust Monsters.
Probably Rust Monsters. Should D&D introduce a playable Rust Monster race?
No.
Yes. I want it. I want it. That would be...
We already have weird-looking owlkin things.
We have
No, thank you.
Owlkin. We have the Thrykeen, if you haven't seen those yet, from Spelljammer. Just giant praying mantis
Oh,
telepaths.
dear.
It's great.